Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joar, and today is Friday, June 7th, 2024. And I've got the excellent Andru Edwards here with me. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. I'm excited. This is you said it was the date, June 7th, which immediately just raised my spirit. Before we started recording, I was like, I'm a little sick. I'm, not feeling it. But when you said June 7th, it reminded me 3 days from now, WWDC, my favorite event of the year. So very excited.
So, I'm glad you bring that up because I was like, in the topics, the first thing I put is like, what do we expect for WWDC? And I'm an Apple person partially, right? I really love my Macs. I'm not a huge iPhone, iPad person. I do love the ecosystem. I love their products. I think they're doing good stuff. But, for me, WWDC is always like, as an ex-developer too, like I want to see what they come out with in terms of OS upgrades and architectural like software stuff. I'm more excited about that. But I think the audience is kind of more excited about like what toys are we going to get? What goodies are we going to get? And we got to admit that since Humane launched, even before that, but really I feel like there was like a tipping point when Humane launched. And then, R1 and then like all of the Google I/O and all that. Like, I hate to say this because I don't want to swear, but man, that's a lot of AI BS we've had to deal with, right? Like, I'm torn about.
Interesting way to put it,
right?
Because here's the thing: like with AI, it's been roughly a year and a half since ChatGPT was first released, and when that came out, it was very obvious, I think, to a lot of us in the tech industry, but also to just the average person who've tried it. There's something. I feel like the best technology is a technology that feels like magic. I've always felt that way.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
The first time I used FaceTime, where it's like, okay, I have this little piece of glass and metal in my hand, allowing me to have a face-to-face conversation with anyone on the planet. That felt like magic at the time, right? So ChatGPT and all these other models, when you talk to it, feels like, how is this real? It feels like I'm in a sci-fi movie, right?
Yep.
The weird thing about AI is, while everything I just said feels true, it also can be very terrible. Like, it's just strange, right? It can be amazing and mind-blowing, and at the same time, it can be terrible. And so the interesting thing is how a lot of people have been saying, a lot of pundits, Apple needs to catch up. Apple's falling behind because look at what Google's doing, look what OpenAI is doing, look what how Samsung's integrating things. And then on the flip side, it's almost like the same people saying this will write articles about how, look at Google's AI answers telling you that you should eat rocks, and look at, you ask something to generate an image and it generates things that are just off the wall.
Fingers.
So when you say Apple's behind, but yet also companies like Google are like putting this right front and center and just giving just completely false answers, Apple's like behind on like something that isn't quite right yet, that no one else is getting right. So
100%
it seems like a disconnect.
The BS part was the business side. Like, I think that AI is a valid thing. You're right. The magic was there when we first started using it. I think it's going to take a lot of iteration and polish to get to a point where it works better and it's reliable. And there's a lot of issues, as you mentioned. I 100% agree with you. And some people, some pundits are like, well, it's kind of like, with Tesla and even just autopilot, never go to full self-driving, just autopilot. To improve autopilot, you need to have data of the real world. It's really hard to simulate. Right. And I'm on board with that. Like, I'm willing to take that risk. And I know a lot of people are not, but I think that technology, like we went to the moon, like we took a huge risk and we learned a lot, and it, came back to us as tons of technology that we benefited from, right?
Yes.
And so my point is, it's like, I'm a believer, like I'm a technologist, but at the same time, I'm also a humanist, and I worry about people and culture and society and how it affects us. And, I had a big rant about AI a couple of weeks back with Judy, just before we went to Dubai, you and I. And it's like, I think that's not what I want to rehash. What I want to rehash is exactly what we're talking about with context to Apple. It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of pundits are right. Yes, we need to put it out there to try it out. But at the same time, I think that when you start seeing it integrated in products that are mission critical, that are almost utilities, right? Like Google search, I think it becomes a problem because it's not polished enough yet. And people like that are not you and me or my audience that are not technologists don't understand that this technology is not like in the past where Google Maps or Apple Maps worked or it didn't work. And when Apple Maps didn't work, Apple went back to the drawing board, remember?
Correct.
Like the point is, it's not like that. It's going to take lots of incremental improvements. And so I'm worried about the BS part being Google, Facebook, all these other companies going head first into the lake and getting eaten by piranhas, basically, and making, we're the piranhas, we're the ones getting eaten, but they're not really like, they just want to make money. And I think that they don't want to be left out. And I get all that, but it's a little disingenuous. And I'm hoping that Apple, who's always the voice of reason when it comes to privacy and security, I don't want them to be left behind. I think they need to try to incorporate some of this stuff into their products early so they can get the iteration. But it can't disrupt the mission critical things. At the same time, I think there's a low hanging fruit. Siri is not that great, right? Like of all the assistants I use, but it's not that great. And I've got an opportunity to use Siri every day because I'm on a Mac every day. I might not use it on my iPhone, but I can just push that button and talk to it. And it's not great. So I also don't want it to be false, right? Like, so that's the problem right now with a lot of the assistants that are powered by ChatGPT, which is, as we know, is pretty much the main player out there, is that, the answers are not reliable. So how much more work is it for you to go check, right? I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. And so in the context of Siri, do you think we're going to see AI added to Siri? Or do you think we're going to see AI added to areas maybe like the Photos app? Like, where do you think it's most likely to happen where Apple can stay Apple and still not be left behind? And also they now need, from an investor point of view, and I hate to say this because, but it's business. They need to show that they're playing with the big boys or whatever, right?
Sure. So I firmly believe, not just from, my own thoughts, but reporting. Mark Gurman has been on fire this year with his Apple reporting. And he's saying, well, first of all, there was the tweet from Greg Joswiak when he announced WWDC. And he said, I'm trying to remember the phrase he used. It's going to be absolutely incredible. I think it was. Watch WWDC. It's going to be absolutely incredible. And he capitalized the A and the I. Absolutely incredible. So they're teasing right there. AI, right?
Okay.
Mark Gurman just this morning put out a report that Apple is likely going to brand, when they say AI to them is going to be Apple intelligence.
Okay.
So not artificial intelligence, Apple intelligence, which, obviously we don't know what that means yet, but I'm guessing that Apple doesn't like the term artificial. There's something about artificial intelligence, or that word, that they may think the average person doesn't trust. But a lot of people who use Apple devices trust Apple, right?
They
trust
do,
them.
and rightfully so, to be honest.
Yes.
As a Pixel user, as my main phone, I have to give it to the iPhone for being better on privacy and security every time.
Right. So I'm assuming here that Apple is going to put some guardrails on the AI that they're incorporating into iOS. Now, we have seen reports from very credible sources that Apple signed a deal with OpenAI. From my point of view, unless I'm missing something, I don't know that there's any smartphone that uses OpenAI as its main AI backend, because the Android phones that do so, I believe, are all using Gemini, if I'm not mistaken.
I think nothing currently has a ChatGPT integration.
Right. Yes.
I think Oppo just announced that they're adding ChatGPT integration into, or some kind of AI and probably ChatGPT on their phones next year or whatever. We're going to talk about that later. But you're right. It's Gemini is a big part of it on Android by default. I think there are select players that are definitely working with, OpenAI.
With OpenAI. Okay. But here's the thing. My understanding is that Microsoft, which has Copilot,
Yeah.
They obviously are a huge investor in OpenAI. But what I've learned is when you're using Copilot, which is powered by GPT-4, OpenAI does not get that data.
No,
That
it's
all
their
runs on
own,
Microsoft
like their
servers.
own model, right? Yeah. And I think
Right,
that's the other
right.
thing you have to kind of distinguish. Personally, I've been trying really hard to get to a point where I can take one of those models, feed it everything I've ever written, and
Mhm.
see how Miriam it ends up being when
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
generate stuff. Like, I'm not trying to replace, because I'm always prefer writing myself, but
Mhm.
it should be interesting to see how close can I get to feeling, because the problem right now, if I ask it to do that, even I've actually asked ChatGPT, I've said, write an intro to a phone review in the
Yep.
style of Miriam Joire. And it doesn't get it,
Not
because
great. Not
even though
great.
it can look me up and know who I am and what I do and how I write, I'm not I'm not ranked high enough in the system, right? Like if it was like, I think if you did Marquez or
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
somebody
yeah.
like that,
Right.
it might work better. So I'm hoping that we can at some point own our own AI. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like we have,
Yeah, yeah. Train. You basically have to train your own AI
yeah,
on an open source model, which you can't
correct.
talk to Max Weinbach about
Yeah,
that
I know.
because
I need to talk to Max about that
he
stuff.
he can help you get that done. But the point I was making, so about Microsoft, I'm gonna assume here that one of the like a company that isn't a $1 trillion company probably isn't in the position to take the models and run it on their own server. So like nothing I'm assuming is just integrating with Chat
Oh yeah,
GPT
yeah. They're
proper,
not.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Apple will likely, I'm guessing, be doing the Microsoft approach, which is we have a
Correct.
deal with OpenAI, but it's running on our servers. It is protected, it's going to be secure, and we are going to enable these specific things that we think will not, basically, for lack of a better term, will not make us look bad.
Right.
Because the Google AI answers, it makes Google search as a product look worse,
It
right?
breaks
When you're
Google
giving
search right
terrible,
now. Yeah,
right?
it does.
So
I mean, I'm
Apple's not
literally
going to do something
bypassing
like
the
that.
first half of my screen now when I do a Google search and go
Right.
dig deep in the
The first half of
trenches.
Google Search is just terrible.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I see your point, and I think that's actually really important. And I think that if they do that and they could pull off the filtering out the wrong, I think it'll be really interesting. But at the same time, I also feel like I want to see what they're going to do on Edge AI, right? They've got this
Mhm.
iPad M4 now, iPad
Yes.
Pro, and they've got this incredible number of tops running on that
Hmm.
NPU. I love that word tops; it's hilarious. But anyway, and I want to see what they can do locally because that would be really cool,
Yeah.
right? Like because Apple privacy security running locally makes a lot more sense than having to
Correct.
go out, especially for things like kind of like personal critical things, right? Like
Hmm.
you know, I'm thinking like anything that deals with your private friend list or things like that should probably stay on device as
Yeah.
much as
Yeah.
possible. Like
Can I go off
editing
on
a
a tangent
photo,
real quick?
yeah, go.
Totally separate. You just reminded me of
Yeah,
something.
go.
Apple is the security company, or
I mean, they care
the
about
one that
user
people see
security and
as
privacy,
privacy
right?
and security.
Like, I
Right.
don't think they're a security company per se, but they
Right.
do
Right. Right.
care and they do a good job.
I think there's something that Apple missed, and I
Oh,
noticed this a couple years ago when iPhone first launched. I think this is something that launched in the early iPhone, and they just forgot it, just left it there, and it's still there. If we meet, right, and we bump our phones, or you give me your contact info, I add you to my contact list, do I now own your information? Do I own your information? Do I own your address, your phone number, your
hmm.
name? So do I own that? I would argue no, I shouldn't, right? It's just you're giving me permission, you're giving me access to this to use to contact you. That's why you're giving it to contact you, right?
Right.
I think it is a major security issue that iOS still allows you when you download some apps, it'll say, "Hey, can we grab your contact list? Can we pull in all your contacts?" Because what if there's a service you download that when I downloaded it, I said to myself, "Oh no, I don't want them to have my information. I'm uninstalling this."
But I
But
might
when
not
you
do that.
downloaded
And
and
then
you
I
shared your
have your info.
contacts, you now just gave them the information that I said to myself, I don't want this company to have. I think they should remove that thing where it says, "Can we grab the entirety of your address book?" It's insane that one person can share, however many, if someone is a friend of a bunch of tech journalists, they can just upload all the information of every tech journalist that they know, 100 tech journalists, and this company will now have all of that without any of those individuals knowing
And then they'll
that
sell
that
it
occurred.
because
Exactly.
we don't know what they can do. Apple might be safe, but who knows whatever chat app you're using. I hear you, and that's the problem. But I think the problem with that is that it's actually a very interesting parallel we should talk about. Is the parallel between, AI photo editing, right? Like there's this whole brouhaha right now of people who are like, and I even don't know where I stand right now exactly. Like I'm kind of in the middle somewhere, but there are people who are like, no, as soon as you edit with an AI tool, it should be marked as AI edited. And I'm like, dude, I just removed a lamppost, like, or just like a letter in a sign. But the camera itself modified the image that I saw when I took it. Correct. So there's filters along the way that already existed that are not AI. Like just contrast and brightness, we all do that. Like, or whatever, edit raw photos, like where do you draw the line? So I'm torn on that too. But I think that the parallel here is this, right? If you marked yourself in your address book, your own entry as do not share, like if some Apple has this technology to do that, you individually, all of us mark our address book as, totally private or I'm willing to share with third parties, right? Like, and then when you tap and bump with another person, it's automatically inheriting that permission.
It's tagged,
and when they say I allow to upload, it only uploads the ones that allow. But here's the problem. The parallel with AI image creation and editing is that I can still go in my phone right now and create an Andru entry, knowing my memorized phone number of you.
That's true.
And at that point, you are still not in control of what I set. If I had the ability to tag you as do not share, you know what I'm saying? So maybe Apple can do it so that by default, when you enter a contact manually, it do not share. You cannot turn that off. But only the creator, if it's them, like how do they verify it's like if I put my second phone number in there under my nickname, which all my friends call me Max, if I put that in there, like Apple has no idea it's not me, right? And then you don't want identity proof BS, right? So like the question, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like I'm just saying like, how do you enforce that? Because my first technical solution is, each person can mark how much sharing they want on their contact. And then as it spreads electronically, it's safe. But the problem is manual entry. Like it's like the same as if I remove the metadata on that Photoshop image that I used AI on, well, guess what? You don't know it was AI edited now, do you? Like, so there's always workarounds, right? And I don't know.
I guess my thing would be, I would just want Apple to remove the API that allows for that to even be
upload altogether. Yeah.
Because then it's just much more difficult to share each individual contact manually, right? Just don't allow an app to say, hey, can we grab your full address book? Like that just seems
maybe the address book should stay, whatever it is in your phone at the time is what the app can access, but they can't get it out.
Right. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, if the Apple of today was launching the iPhone today for the first time, they would not include that as a feature. They would not include that today.
Right.
It's just, I feel like it's something that they included in a while ago, and it's just kind of fallen by the wayside. I don't even think about it anymore. But anyway, that was an aside.
No, it's a good aside. So let's talk about WWDC in terms of hardware. Do you the M4 chip is out, and I'm screaming in my head. Like ever since it came out in April, I'm just like, what the? Where's my Mac with an M4? Because I'm a Mac person. And I'm like, I'm ready for an M4 computer of some kind. Because I want that, I want that ability to do local AI, edge AI.
Neural engine.
So do you think we're going to see Mac Minis? Do you think we're going to see, like the iMac's not happening because it just got M3. The MacBook Air's not happening, it got M3. Did the MacBook Pros get M3?
Yep, they got M3 Pro and M3 Max.
Unless there's an M4 Max or something.
Yeah, so here's the thing. The only products that are not on M3 are the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro. They're still on M2 Max and M2 Ultra.
Wait, the Mac Mini, right?
Oh, you're right. And the Mac Mini.
Okay.
Correct. So those 3 desktops. But the rumors are saying no hardware at WWDC this year.
No.
And here's my guess as to why.
Why?
They have never done a WWDC where they have also had to talk about Vision OS. So now we've got a whole new segment that has to be added in to the keynote that's going to make it already longer.
I'd forgotten
than typical.
about that device.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. See, no, I love I have it right here. I use this thing every day, Apple Vision Pro, daily.
Wow.
And for me, one of the coolest use cases, which originally I thought was going to be silly, it didn't pique my interest at all. One of my favorite things to do is to use it as a Mac display. I can put this thing on right here in front of my Mac, make a 10-foot screen if I want to, and I could be editing a video with a huge timeline with my other apps in spatial. So now I can just have the full screen to just whatever I'm doing and have my email in a window somewhere on the ceiling and my iMessages over here on the floor if I need them. It's great for things like that. But these keynotes already go long with just talking about iOS, iPad OS, Mac OS, right? Now we've got Vision OS and Watch OS. Now we've got Vision OS to add to it. So I think the keynote is just going to be so full of things, especially this is the first major update for Apple Vision Pro software. They're going to need time for that as well. So as much as I would love to see an M4 powered Mac, I think we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that. It is interesting though that the M4 was, the first and only product that it's in is an iPad, which a lot of people would argue is it's overpowered for what an iPad is, or at least what we know an iPad to be. Right. What I'm hoping is that at WWDC we see something
that takes advantage of the hardware.
Exactly. Because there's no, unless, I haven't done a direct comparison between like the base level M4 and like an M2 Ultra or M3 Ultra. Obviously the Ultra chips will be faster than the base level, but I'm curious, what is Apple's fastest base level chip going to be capable of when they introduce all these AI features? What is going to set the iPad, which is the only device with this chip, apart from everything else? I'm very curious. It almost feels like it's time. We've said for so many years, the iPad needs to do more than it does. And if you're going to put this amount of hardware in it, and with all the rumors surrounding, this hardware requiring these new chips, what are they going to do with the iPad? Oh, and by the way, one thing we missed on iPhone, the rumor this morning, or the report this morning from Gurman that he just said, a lot of the AI features are going to require an iPhone 15 Pro.
Yeah, 15 Pro specifically.
15
Wait,
Pro.
yeah, because it's got the new chip.
The chip, yes.
I forgot about the fact that the 15 and the 15 Pro have different chips. So for saying,
yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad I
it's
bought a 15
make it
Pro Max then.
A subset of people, right? And then when I'm sure the 16 and 16 Pro will also support it. But if you've got a 15 or earlier, you may be left out of a lot of these things.
So do you think the SE 4, when it comes out, because we all love ourselves a cheap iPhone, I'm sorry, I do. Do you think he'll have it?
I'm going to have to say yes. I'm going to say once WWDC happens on Monday,
every iPhone after that,
anything that comes after, anything that
so
comes after that. So that
means that the new chip that they're developing for the 16 and 16 Pro are, a step beyond, and then that the SE4 is going to get the 15 Pro chip. Which is
something like that, yeah.
Kind of that's insane.
What I would guess.
Wow.
That's what I would guess.
Wow.
When is that supposed to come? Like in the spring or something like that?
Yeah, I think 2025, spring-ish.
Okay, yeah, probably April.
I'm betting because it's always the spring with the SE.
Yep.
I'm bummed though, like no hardware. Like I get it, but I kind of give me a Mac Mini with M4, just M4. It doesn't have to do like I mean M2 on a Mac Mini is stupendous already.
Is that what you use? What do you use primarily? I
have an M2 MacBook here I'm recording on right now, and I've got behind me, literally behind this setup, like there is an iMac Core i5 that I barely use anymore.
Core i5. What year?
Well, it's only 4 years old. Like I bought it in just before COVID, like 18. So I bought
Okay.
okay, so mine it's six at time, COVID.
Yep,
It's 6 years old. It's old, but like the reality is when I bought it, I got 16 gigs of RAM, I've got an SSD in there. It's fine.
Yep.
What I notice is when I do like CPU intensive, anything, like even just Audacity, when I edit this podcast and I do like noise reduction or whatever, it's like a sluggish compared to my M2 Air, who just goes woof. And for the longest time, I didn't want to update Audacity because Audacity got bought. They used to be open source, and they got bought by a third party. And now there's all kinds of conditions around, like it kind of pissed me off. So I stayed on the old version, and the old version was Intel, right? So I was emulating on my M2 Mac for a while, and it was still twice as fast as my Core i5. And this only has 8 gigs, and my Core i5 is 16 gigs. Like, it's night and day. And actually, I'm at the point now where this is like a little in between my audience and I think. I'm at the point where I'm kind of getting pissed off at my M2 Air for not being fast enough at doing stuff. and I'm talking about like everyday use. I'm talking about like these specific things, like when I do more, I'm using more and more advanced AI-based actually audio tools in Audacity. And there's a bunch of really great open source plugins.
Interesting.
And I'm like, okay, now I need more horsepower. And never mind on the Core i5, it's terrible. So I use this iMac because it's got a beautiful 5K display. And because for just web browsing and stuff, it's perfectly fine. But I'll give you an example. It's crazy. A Mac from 6 years ago has a hard time playing 4K video properly. Like, it's like when I'm watching YouTube, every now and then I'm like, I'm dropping frames. I should drop down to like 1440p or something on the, on the settings. And I'm like, how is that even possible? But on this M2, it's like it plays 4K videos without even like blinking. So the point is, I'm using this, but I'm looking, and I was about to buy an iMac, a new one with the M3 chip.
Yeah.
Right. To replace this, but it's the smaller screen sizes. And like, I wish you could do display target display mode. You remember that?
Oh yeah, I sure do.
Because this display is perfectly good. Like I don't want to, don't want to recycle it. It's silly, right? Or people say like crack it open, put that little board in it that turns into like a monitor, right? Like
what?
There's a third party there's a open, like it's like a DIY thing out there.
Yeah.
You can crack open an iMac, remove the motherboard, and then put a little board in its place that's shaped the right way, and it gives you the ports, like the display port entry. So you now turn your monitor into a monitor, right? So you keeps the power supply, just like it's not, and I think one of the modules even has the USB port, so you can have a hub in there, so you can actually use the ports in the back. And depending on how much money you spend on the boards, you can get Ethernet even. So basically it turns into a hub. It's really nice, but it's like $600 for the board. Like at that point, it's like buy a new monitor, right?
Exactly.
So I think iMac is still more, like I used to have Mac Mini with an external monitor, but then the external monitors, I'm always like, the problem I have with the Mac external monitors is, even if I go 4K, it's not good enough. Like the scaling issue, right? If you want to kind of go 5K. You want either 5K or you want 1080p or whatever, right? And I'm not going 1080p, so that's why I'd rather buy an iMac where I know the scaling is going to be right, the display is going to be gorgeous. The problem is that they don't make a big one. I mean, 27-inch to 24.5 is going to be a downsizing.
I think that the problem solver there, I mean, it's not an all-in-one, but I think the route Apple sees as the
studio
solution
monitor
is the studio display plus either a Mini or a Mac Studio.
Yeah, but you see, I think a studio display with a Mac Studio is a good combo, but it's beyond what I need price point wise, right? What I need is Apple to make a cheaper display than studio displays. It doesn't have like this complicated like firmware upgrade and like some kind of A chip in there.
It's running a smartphone chip.
It's crazy. Like,
your monitor has a 64 gigabytes of RAM.
Give us a dumb monitor. Can we just get a dumb monitor with a good panel that costs like $600, $599, and that goes with a Mac Mini for $599?
What about that LG? Doesn't LG make a 5K?
No, they do, but it's more than $599. And also, it's LG. It doesn't look as nice.
They make such great TVs. I forget the monitors aren't.
The monitors are, I'm not talking about the quality. I'm just talking about the aesthetically, like on your desk.
The bezeling.
And that's why I'd rather have an iMac at that point. And also, as much as the iMac is not upgradable, with an M3 chip, and if I buy one with enough storage, it'll be fine for like probably more than 6 years. Like I
Yeah.
only have an M2 MacBook Air because I basically got one for free. So I was like, okay. And I had
That's
an
nice.
M1 MacBook Air before that. And so I gave that to Theo. And we're now both living the Apple M chip lifestyle. And it's
There you
freaking
go.
amazing. I mean, we bought my MacBook M1, the Air, like day of launch. Like I've been waiting for ARM Max for so long that I
Yeah.
pushed the button literally when they announced it because I was like, I don't care. It's not as I wanted it to be a 12-inch MacBook with ARM. I still want that, but I was like, okay, it's an Air. I can go there. But
Yes.
I have no need for a Pro. Although, as I said, right now some of the AI tools, I'm like, maybe M3.
That's where the need, like, if you really want to take advantage of these on-device AI, I don't know that many people understand this.
I think right now the
AI
tools
is
I'm
so
using.
taxing.
My AI tools right now, I think they're just CPU and GPU bound. They don't even know of NPU.
Oh, they don't even
because
touch
they're-
the neural engine yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're not written specifically for Mac. They're plugins that work on Audacity, which, as you know,
Okay.
works on anything.
Yes.
So I think they're compiled for M. But do they take advantage of all the M features? I don't think so, especially not the NPU. But I think that they will still speed up things a lot more if I give them more CPU and GPU power, right? So that's why I'm like,
Absolutely.
M3 is possibly a good update. M4, that's why I'm like, a Mac Mini M4 would make me go and
Ooh.
buy an external monitor and go.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Okay.
that would be the combo for me.
Balls in your
Because
court, Apple. Come on.
I mean, that's why I was like, do we get hardware? Because all I really want is a Mac Mini, or, like I wasn't expecting to get much hardware, but I figured like, watches are later this year, right? They're not going to happen.
Yeah,
at
watches are always
WWDC.
September with the iPhone.
Do you think Vision Pro is not happening for another while, right? They're going to make a cheaper
A new one? Yeah, I don't think we'll see anything this year. If anything, it would be next year, and that would probably be a like a more budget friendly, not cheap, but just cheaper than the
So no
Vision Pro.
hardware. Wow.
No hardware. But that's, I mean, obviously we still have another half a year for hardware. Anything else Apple announces this year is going to be hardware based. But for WWDC in particular, it sounds like it's going to be all software.
Do you think?
Because it's going to be such a big shift. It's going to be
Right.
such a big shift from anything they've done before.
Do you think beyond the AI announcement and the fact we're not getting hardware and we have to cover OSs for like Apple TV, even like everything, right? Do you think we're going to get some other thing that they're going to announce that is going to kind of surprise us or be delightful? Because that's the other thing, right? Like I'm not saying it's their job to delight us because this is a developer conference,
Right.
but they need to delight the developers, and developers are a little cranky right now because AI is stealing their jobs as well. Like I used to write video games all the time, and I've played with Chat GPT, and I'm like, holy crap, dude, I could write stuff. Like I forgot, like sometimes I forget how to do something because I haven't been actively a developer for a decade now. And I'm like, oh, how do I do this again? And I Chat GPT, how do I? And it just like spews out some C code, and I'm like, oh yeah. And it's amazing because like I would have literally taken me a few hours to write that from scratch. And normally I probably wouldn't write it from scratch if it was like a standard algorithm that is well documented out there. There's libraries you can just download, and a lot of them are open source. And that's why every app you see today has like, a little disclaimer in the legal part saying open source licenses, right? Because the reality is that even back when I was developing in the late 90s on PC, like Windows games, we were using open source libraries.
Oh, interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're not going to reinvent the freaking wheel, all right? Like,
why
rewrite an FFT or an IDCT algorithm? It's out there. It's been optimized to death. Like, nobody, you're not going to write a better one,
right?
Right. So
you're developing in a smart way.
But now with ChatGPT, you can literally say like, here's what I'm trying to do. Give me the skeleton for this. And then you can iterate on it. As a developer, iteration is what's the cool part. That's the fun part. You try something new, it crashes, you debug it, fix it. And so that's kind of what I'm excited about, to see also how Apple integrates AI into Xcode to make the developers' lives easier.
I believe that's coming on Monday as well. And, it's funny when you mentioned a lot of people are saying, AI is going to, people are complaining AI is taking our jobs. I saw one, I forget who said it, but maybe it might have been Satya. It's not that AI is going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI is going to replace the person who does not, right? In a similar way to, if you back in the day, you were great at writing things down with your, handwritten notes, and then someone comes along and is like, yeah, I know how to type in Word, right? Microsoft Word used to be really important to put on like your resume.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? So like,
yeah.
Obviously today it's almost laughable to say you know how to use Microsoft Word. It's just another new tool that people need to pick up and learn. I think Apple is going to not just add AI into Xcode, but probably they're going to have all sorts of different APIs that developers can call that they don't need to figure out how do I do AI transcription, for example. Oh, I don't need to. I can just pull Apple's transcription service, right? Pull that into my app. So I think Apple's going to have a lot of things that are AI based for developers so that when September rolls around with the release of iOS 18 and all the other apps, that it'll be very easy for developers to add a lot of, whether it's chat bot types of things or transcription types of things or image generation, image editing into their apps in a safer, non-Wild West feeling way compared to a lot of what else is out there. When it comes to surprising and delighting people, I think, first of all, I think a lot of the AI stuff will be that.
Yeah.
But some things that Apple has that are not AI related, for example, is finally RCS, right? Coming into the Apple ecosystem.
How do you feel? Do you think that's going to make a difference? So I feel like it's not, in the sense that, they're not going to implement RCS such that, like, because, you need to fire up your own servers like Google has, right? So like, unless they do that, like how do we get RCS incompatibility? Like, it's one thing to have the stack and the software in your message app, but like does it actually work when you interop with Android? And of course, it's still going to look like the wrong color because they're not going to give us the blue bubbles.
No, they're not going to change
RCS,
that at all.
Right?
No reason for them to do that. I think at the end of the day, what it's going to solve is no matter who you're messaging, you can send high quality photos, high quality videos. You can get read receipts. Your tapbacks will work.
I hope we can do that at least. So right now they've worked around the thumbs up and the reaction icons actually work because you can, at least if you're a Pixel and RCS, and you're talking to an Apple person, when you react to their thing, it sends them the equivalent, so they see a reaction,
which is good.
And then when they react, you see also the reaction, which is really cool. They've kind of worked that out.
Yep.
There's a few things like that. Let's move on to the other rest of the stuff that we have.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some phones. Look, we could go on. It's great. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your coverage next week. So folks, don't forget to watch Andrew's videos, right? Because you're getting in there. You're going to be in the mothership. When does this go out? Sunday. So just before.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I have like 9 briefings. So I'm really like, I've never had that many.
I know
briefings.
you're like you're in the mothership. You'll be like taken in the deepest depths.
Yes.
So the next thing we have on the list is the Moto Edge 2024 is now officially out in the US. And like, I don't want to get too excited about it. I've got a review unit coming. It's basically the Edge. It's not the Edge Plus. So don't let yourselves get too excited. Last year's Edge Plus, I felt, finally got Moto to a level where they were competitive with the normal flagships out there. Finally, camera lived up to, it wasn't the best, but it was like in the ballpark, which was great. There. The Moto Edge last year, the regular one that came out in the fall, was kind of like, not like flew under the radar. We didn't cover it much because it came out at the same time as a lot of other more important phones, but it was a really amazingly solid phone for the money and really well, spec'd. And so I hope that this one comes at least as close. In the rest of the world, like in Europe, the global markets, they've gotten their Moto 50 series, which is their new their line there. They have like a Fusion and a regular and a Pro and an Ultra. And the Ultra, I'm hoping we get at least the Pro or the Ultra equivalent come as the Plus here, because they're really good. Like the
How is Motorola internationally? So I actually have not reviewed a Motorola device probably in about 8 years because whoever I was working with at Motorola back then left, and I hadn't gotten a new contact until a couple weeks ago. Someone reached out to me from Motorola. So
nice.
I'm not fully up to speed on how their devices are, like as it pertains to compared to others. But also, I'm curious because here in the US, I mean, you travel as much or maybe even more than I do. You're all over the place. It's rare that I step on an airplane and see someone using a Motorola device. So how are they on an international basis though? Are they
Well, it
more
really depends
widely
which region
accepted?
you're in, right? Like, so I was in South America because I went to Antarctica, so I had to be in Argentina for a few days first. And man, they're everywhere. Like, that's all you see. And they're like the G
Really?
series, right? They're not the really fancy ones. Um, and it's really interesting to see all of a sudden, like half the phones people holding their hands are Motos. And Motos you've never heard of either. Like they're slight variations on the Gs we get here, so they're slightly different. It's really
Mhm.
strange. So I don't really know, to be honest with you. Like Europe, I don't think is huge for them. I think parts of Asia is pretty big. They also have completely different line in China. So they have the X line in China. So the what we know as the Edge in Europe, Edge 50 series in Europe, and Edge non like year numbered, right? Edge 2024, 20
Yep.
whatever year. And then it over there it's called the X50. So Moto X50 series, and it's kind of equivalent. So that's China only, and who knows? I haven't been in China since pre-COVID, and so I don't know what it looks like. I don't think they have any footprint. Remember, though, they're owned by Lenovo, so Lenovo is still a big part of China's electronics industry, and
Yes.
so. But I can tell you in South America, what we keep hearing that South America is the bastion of Moto, the 100% correct, and it's impressive. But I don't think people can afford the razors and the edges there, right? It's like this phone costs whatever $550 or whatever is the price is going to be, and it's it's not even attainable to them, right?
Mhm.
So basically, looking at this device, it's very similar to the 50 Fusion and the rest of the world, the global model, the one in Europe. The only thing I think it sacrifices versus last year's model, which I think is a bit of a bummer, is it doesn't have a metal frame anymore. So it's got a plastic frame, but it retains the wireless charging. It does get a better processor than last year's Edge.
Which is good.
So it's fine. I just wish I want to see what the Edge Plus brings to the table. Really,
Yeah.
the rest of it, the specs are solid. The cameras were surprisingly good on the non-Plus Edge last year. So I'm hoping that carries over.
Absolutely.
I think Moto's finally putting a bit of effort in their cameras, not at the G level yet, but at the Edge and Razor level. I mean, the Razor is not the best camera system, the current one, and I'm sure there's a new one coming soon. There've been rumors all over the place. But I think that considering how low spec the hardware is, really, it's kind of the same problem as the Z Flip 5, right? 12 megapixel sensors.
Mhm.
We're kind of over that now. But considering the hardware, I think the image processing on the Razor Plus is fine. It's not outstanding, but it's competitive. So I'm hoping that the new Razors crank things up a notch, and hopefully this Edge does as well. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm getting one. I'll let you know what is basically. Moving on though, I want to talk about Samsung briefly because there's strong rumors. We finally got some leaks of what the Z Fold 6 and the Z Flip 6 are looking like, and oh boy, look, I think the Z Flip last year did, bring new stuff. Like they followed in Moto's footsteps, so the large display, la la la. But it looks like it's not changing much. And then the Fold is squarer, but the cameras are supposedly exactly the same as the Z Fold 5.
Weren't those the same as the 4, roughly?
Yeah.
If my memory serves me right,
Yeah.
this 5 maintained the 4's cameras.
Yeah.
So if it maintains the 5's cameras, it's really just maintaining the 4's cameras.
I know. Crazy.
That's kind of, I mean, it's funny because whenever I do an iPhone video, every September, obviously, iPhone drops, do the videos, do the content. In the comments, it's always Samsung fans saying, this is the same phone as last year. Every time. It's the same phone as last year. And yet, with the Fold line, I feel like for at least 2 years, the 3, 4, and 5 to me were very, very similar devices to each other. It's almost as if it's just the colors that have changed, and particularly talking about the Fold, not the Flip. The Flip obviously has been a little more iterative, Even this year, it's supposed to be getting a little bit
last year
bigger
at
outer
least they
screen.
closed flat. That was a big improvement. But like the
and
problem
and
is
a
that-
larger outer screen.
Yeah, and also like I think this looks a little bit more on the like form factor wise wider, the fold. Like the aspect
When
ratio is a
folded.
little bit more, I don't know, palatable.
Yeah,
Because this tall and skinny stuff wasn't working for me.
I agree.
The
Same
reality
here.
though is like Open came along, and I'm not even talking about
was
like
so
the
good.
Xiaomi folding phones and the Vivo folding phones, who are absolutely kicking butt in China and are incredible. But like beyond that, Open showed the way. Like seriously, if you don't at least match the Open, and the cameras don't even remotely look like they're gonna match the Open, so I'm like, what are you thinking, Samsung?
Well, I imagine that what they're thinking is here in the US, I'm
People
assuming in
don't
the
buy
US
these.
is the primary, like, where would you say most Samsung Fold customers live? Would it be Korea and the US?
Yeah, probably, yeah. And
Okay.
maybe some of Europe.
So in Korea, there is an affinity towards Samsung devices.
Oh, well, they own that market, yeah.
Right, so they don't need to try that hard there. And in the US, when it comes to foldables, again, going back to what I said earlier about traveling, if I see a foldable, it is a Samsung foldable. I never see a Pixel Fold. I never see the Open. The Open is so good. I never see a Razer. I see a Samsung foldable device if it's foldable at all here in the US. So,
right.
Obviously, unless I'm with like my tech friends, then Mr. Mobile has every foldable under the sun.
I mean,
but
I carry an Open still since it launched because I love it so much.
By the way, is it rumored that there's not going to be a follow up to that this year?
Not this year, no. Remember, Oppo drives that, that ride basically. So because the Oppo N3, Find N3 is a OnePlus Open, right? That's also why a lot of Oppos are getting the slider, because they're, it's interesting actually, because I think the Oppo Find N3 Flip, the flip phone they did last year with the 3 cameras, the only flip phone that has a decent camera system anywhere in the world right now, was looked like a OnePlus device. It has slider and everything, and it never came. I think last minute they decided, no, we can't do both a fold and a flip in the West on the OnePlus brand. It's too much. So they went, let's go for our nerdy audience, which will be want the fold, right? Not the flip.
Yep.
And they did that. But in Asia, you can get the Oppo, the flip one, and it's a solid phone. The only thing it lacks, again, is wireless charging, just like the Open. But other than that, there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. I have one. I love it. But it's also not like, it's a global market. So it's sold with like Google stuff. It's not like a weird Chinese phone where you have to install all the Google apps or anything like that. I think the reality is they've done such a good job with that Open that they want the Open 2 to also shine. They don't want to do a Samsung, right?
Okay.
So, and also it's really expensive, and they don't sell a lot of them. As you already told, the only folds you see out there are Samsung.
Right.
So I think for Oppo, it's like, if we wait another year, or maybe it'll come out in the new year, like early, like instead of the September, it'll be a January launch, right?
Yeah.
Like if we have an 8 Gen 4 in there, we can... We can then have like a really big upgrade, and maybe it'll be thinner and lighter. I actually think it might be a Gen 3, simply because every rumor so far of the 8 Gen 4 is that it's a beast with these Orion cores, and it's like thermal management hell. And
really?
it gets hot, and it draws battery, which is why all the BBK Group flagships that are rumored to come in December, January are going to have 6,000 milliamp hour battery, and I rumor not to have wireless charging to keep them thin.
Oh,
so I think we're all a little worried right now about Qualcomm's Orion Core Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 being another one of those power hog chips, like the 808 and the 810 Snapdragons were, like the 8 Gen 1, the original that was not TSMC. When they did the 8 Plus Gen 1, things got better. So I'm not saying, look, Qualcomm is awesome. Like, they are pros at what they do, but they're trying to move the needle forward. And sometimes when you change the architecture completely, like when they changed 808, 810, that was a change of architecture.
Yep.
It's a miss usually. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of folding phones with 8 Gen 4 out of the out of the gate because of the power consumption and heat issues. It's going to be really hard to manage on a thin phone.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if you know, but the reason the OnePlus Open can't do 4K video when the phone is closed on the front cameras is because it gets too hot. They can only do it with the unfolded.
That was why.
Yeah, there's something
What?
like that. Yeah, because when it's open, there's more surface area to cool, and it cools better. Right? It's crazy stuff like that. On an 8 Gen 3 you have to deal with, right?
Mhm.
Never mind this new thing. So I don't know. I think, look, I'm disappointed simply because I know that Samsung, like Apple, has like infinite budget and infinite know-how and infinite power to throw engineers at things.
Correct.
And I want, because when they apply themselves, I think I want to see that again. On the other hand, it looks like the Ring is what they're putting all their energy and focus on, right? And the Ring is going to be technologically, I think, a masterpiece. And that's, I think, where they're putting their eggs into. This is iterative for them again, because they're like, we're doing the Ring. And I bet you the reason that, that they're doing an event in Paris that apparently is going to be, a few of us might go, but not many, because I think they're focusing on the lifestyle, kind of like the Apple Watch back when Apple, I think I get it. I think that
Is that the launch of the Ring? Is that going to be?
I
in
believe
conjunction?
we're going to see it at the same time as the folding phones. And I think that's because the folding phones are kind of meh. I mean, they're iterative again,
Yeah.
and they know
Yeah.
what we wrote last year. A lot of us are just getting briefed and not going to Paris to see the actual thing, unlike last year. Because, I feel bad for Samsung. They flew us to Korea last year, and then we were like, these phones are crap. I mean, there was a tablet
That's
and
their
a
fault.
watch. The watch is really great, so it's not all crap. But I'm just saying, like, they weren't crap. Like, they're just not. They weren't very inspiring. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I needed to go out there and use the phones. Didn't feel
Sure.
like compelled. Like with Pixel Fold, I was like, oh my god, a Pixel that folds. I must use it. So I did. And Open, I was like, oh my god, OnePlus Open. And then I used it, and it was really great. And I was like, okay, the cameras for me are really important. They were really great. And so but the Fold and the Flip, I used them, and I was like, solid phones, can recommend. Improvements with the hinge, improvements with that big display on the Flip, but not good enough. Not pushing the envelope enough. Very iterative, very Apple-like in that sense.
Are we excited about the Ring?
Yeah, because I think that for a lot of people, wearing a smartwatch or even a smart band when you sleep is not something they're comfortable with, and a Ring is definitely much more chill. And I think people are going to love that. And I think having Samsung, it's kind of like the Apple Watch, right? Somebody's making a Ring that's not some kind of startup. Like, remember Pebble, right?
Yeah.
I was there. So it's like, you can't compete. Like, you have to have, like, I'm hoping that the Ring democratizes that form factor as a health and fitness device for those who don't want to wear a band. And more importantly, that because there's a Ring, Apple will make a Ring.
Yeah.
And Apple will make a Ring, and everyone else will make a Ring, right? Xiaomi will make a Ring.
Yeah, the thing, when you just said that, it reminded me of how I felt about all these AI the two AI gadgets that launched, the past couple months, the Humane and Rabbit, right?
Yeah.
I miss the time where it felt like just anyone could just make a gadget and they would just put it out there, right? Like the Pebble, for example. Like, nowadays, it seems like if a big company doesn't make it, then it's garbage. Like, because we know if Apple
but it's not,
or Samsung,
right? It's like, I think it's just the average consumer is not willing to take the risk anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be an established
You and
brand.
I will take the risk. Lots of people are wearing Oura rings and they love it. And I'm not saying Oura is like, I bet you Oura.
Ultra Human right here. Ultra Human ring.
Ultra Human. There you go. So I think you're right. There's something there to be said about this. I think the whole tech industry right now is kind of going through like a malaise era, an era of sadness.
I was hoping, I wanted those two devices to be good because I wanted to see upstart gadget, not just upstart software maker, but upstart hardware makers again that just come on, just put stuff out there that's kind of quirky or weird, but I want it to work. So like, the Humane and Rabbit both seem to have kind of just really stumbled or just fell flat out of the gate, and made me sad because I like seeing just new companies I've never heard of come out and just put stuff out there that looks
Yeah.
good and works well.
I feel you. I'm with you on that. Let's rapid fire through some of these other things. I want to quickly talk about CMF because, well, Nothing has a sub brand in India mostly called CMF, which makes like earbuds and smartwatches that are really affordable. We're talking like
Inexpensive.
Inexpensive, like lower end, and some of them don't even have noise canceling or anything on their earbuds. So it's interesting because now there's rumors of them coming out with a phone, which, of course, that's Carpe playbook, right? Like, awesome. But look at the specs on this phone, and it's not too bad. Like, there's finally some leaks of a phone in a case.
Yep.
And Dimensity 7200, I believe that's the chipset that was in the Moto Edge last year. So, it gives you perspective. Now, 50 megapixel cameras, of course, everybody has them now. It's not like a big deal. But look, OLED display at 120 hertz on a phone that's probably going to cost about $250.
Not bad at all.
And India is a special case, right? They're very competitive on pricing, so I'm not too surprised. But I'm excited because, look, I'm a big fan of cheap, inexpensive phones done right. Like, Nothing Phone 2A is a good example here for North America because we get it here. Pixel 8A, Pixel 7A, because, at their normal price, they're not that interesting, honestly. They're good, but at their discounted price, which happens all the time, they're really kicking butt. And I feel like, as much as I don't like the Tensor chip you're still getting, it's still a flagship chipset, and you're still getting a flagship chip. It's like you're not getting that with the Phone 2A, but like the OnePlus 12R is a good example. Now, we're not talking about that high level still. We're talking like a whole division lower than that with this Nothing CMF Phone 1. So let's see what happens. I'm excited though to see that Carl is playing his playbook just like he always does, and we're going to see some cool devices come out of it. Also because the attention to detail is there. Like I thought with 2A, they were going to be cutting too many corners, but after reviewing that phone, I was like, no, this is solid. So let's see how low they can go, right?
So this would be specifically, so CMF does not operate outside of India, is that correct?
Right now, I don't think so, no. There might be some markets, like Malaysia or whatever, but I'm not sure. I have to figure that out. OnePlus has a white OnePlus 12 available, and it's hot, but it's only India again.
Oh, really? I didn't realize it was only for India. Okay.
No, it's only India. So
why?
Yeah, I don't know, because India is a big market for them.
That's interesting. I mean,
yeah.
People get excited about new colors of smartphones. I mean, unreasonable as it seems, it's exciting.
I don't usually either, but it's rare that OnePlus does it so late in the game. Usually they come out with a few colors a few weeks after the initial launch, right? So, and also interesting that it's India. But I mean, it might come to other markets, but right now it's just India. Yeah. So, I'll put links to all these stories. The next couple of links are on Oppo. Oppo had an AI conference in London where they announced that they're going to put AI in all of its smartphones starting next year. Yeah. And a lot of it is on-device local AI for photo stuff. They showed some of us this a little bit at MWC, but it wasn't as, we're doing AI on all smartphones. I was invited to the London event. I couldn't make it. My apologies, Oppo. There's just too much travel going on right now. But, it looks really interesting. I'll put a link up. Also, they announced that the Find X8 series, which is their flagship, which we didn't get in the West at all. It was China only this past year, the Find X7 Pro and Ultra and regular. The Ultra is an incredible phone, and I have one, and my review on Geekspin is going up any day now, so check that out. I took it to Antarctica with me and stuff. Crazy camera system. That's China only, and so the fact that they've publicly announced that the flagships are coming to the rest of the world next year, the global markets is
going global. Does that include the US?
No, because Oppo has OnePlus in US, and we're going to get a OnePlus 13, which will basically like the non-pro version of the Oppo, right? In fact, if you think of the Find X7 Ultra that I just reviewed for Geekspin, if you think of it as a OnePlus 12 Pro, you basically have the right idea. Like from the front, it's a OnePlus 12. Even almost all the controls are in the same place. But then you flip it over and you got a crazy camera pod with quad 50 megapixel, dual periscope telephotos, the whole 9 yard, and that massive 1-inch sensor. That's where they cranked up the notch. Everything else is the same. Same wireless charging, same battery, same processor, same RAM, same display. So you can really see how Oppo and OnePlus are doing their kind of like side-by-side thing. But we're not going to get the Ultra here. We're going to get like a 13 or 13 Pro or something. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And then, let's talk about this because you have a device. Xreal has a Android device they say is not a smartphone, but it looks like a smartphone called the Beam Pro, and it's got a 3D camera system on it. What? It's coming back. The LG or whatever, the HTC, what was it? Evo 3D is back.
Yeah. So Xreal, they make these augmented reality glasses. And they're supposed to just look like regular shades, plastic shades, sunglasses. On the inside, though, it's pretty chunky because they have the displays in there.
Yeah, they have these like
you look at
angled, weird.
Right.
Yeah. Prism.
And then it has a USB-C port on the stem that you can then plug into an iPhone with USB-C or an Android device.
Yeah.
And they have this companion. So you can use the glasses just like that. You plug them into a smartphone or any USB-C, whether it's a computer or tablet, and you can mirror the screen into your vision without looking at the device, and that's your augmented reality. But they also have something called the Beam, which you would then, instead of plugging directly, you would plug your device into the Beam, and the Beam would give the glasses some extra features. So, for example, you can. One thing I remember you saying is you were wondering why you can't just anchor a screen when you're in VR, so that if you turn your head, the screen goes with you instead of just leaving the screen kind of where it is in the real world. The Beam allows you to do that. That's one of many things the Beam allows you to do. So they just released something called the Beam Pro, which just adds new features, including the most interesting of which that you just said is the pair of 50 megapixel cameras on the back. They're spaced about 50 millimeters apart from each other, which is, it's trying to mimic, some distance, like you have distance between
just
your
like
two
the
eyes.
eyes. Yeah, so you can make some 3D content for your AR
so you
glasses.
can capture 3D photos, 3D videos, and then easily view them in the glasses themselves. And so
cool.
It has a 4-nanometer Snapdragon chip in there. I don't know which one. Has a 4,500 milliamp hour battery, 6 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage. You can expand it up to a terabyte. So it really feels like a smartphone without a screen. The screen is the glasses. And it's all about giving you augmented reality experience on the go. And it feels like it's Xreal and I think another company, Rayneo, seem like the two that are kind of trying to play in this glasses AR world as opposed to a headset AR world.
It's an interesting.
Have you used these? I've
used the Xreal glasses very briefly at various events, but I haven't used the Beam. I didn't even know there was a Beam before the Beam Pro. This is the first time. This actually has a display though. This has a 6.5-inch 90 hertz LCD.
Oh, it does? Okay, so there's a display on there as well. I wonder what's the point of.
I don't know. I guess maybe it's you can put all your content because micro SD. Maybe you put all your content on this. You don't have to waste your phone's battery life. Like
makes sense.
You put all your videos for the flight in there, and you don't. That's
actually a great idea.
I think that's what it is. But look, the reality is it's not very expensive. Like it says $180 for the 6/128 and a little more for the 8/256. So. And
they're even going to release a 5G version, so they're going to put out a version with a cellular
so
radio.
It'll be more like a smartphone then.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Just interesting.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to give you a companion device that just focus. Like if you really want to be playing in AR, right, and you want to iterate there, you need control of the OS. You can't just be an app on the phone. You need control of the device, and that's kind of what they're trying to do.
Exactly. All right, then there's a few more items. I'm just going to rapid fire through so we can finish. But at the same time, I want your thoughts on a couple of things here. HTC is teasing a new phone. It could be.
What is it?
It's going to be the U24 Pro because they do sell some phones in Taiwan, only Taiwan. And
They
they're,
still sell phones?
They're not made by them. They're just kind of like Shenzhen makes them
Like
for them.
rebadged? Okay.
And they're okay, but they're not great. The U23 last year was interesting, but not groundbreaking. But also the other thing they've done is some crypto phones. So everybody's kind of joking around that they're going to do another crypto phone.
Okay.
I don't know what to think of it. But look, as somebody who loved HTC back in the day, I just have to report the news. There's an HTC phone coming. If
I
you're in
miss those
Taiwan,
HTC devices.
yeah, it was good times. The last two things I want to mention are that Intel has announced some new chips. And to be at Computex just finished in Taipei. I couldn't go, sadly, because I couldn't find a sponsor. I'm really jonesing to go back because they haven't gone since 2019 before COVID. But the Lunar Lake chips from Intel are showing that, Intel is waking up from its, 4 years into the M chips.
Finally.
They're like finally going, well, I mean, they did a little bit last year with the previous gen that had the Ultra series. But they are finally waking up to try to compete with Snapdragon X and Apple M series, and I'm here for it. Like I still think that they eventually need to go to ARM, and I know for them it's a religion to do x86. But you look at the architecture of this SoC, of this chip. And I just said SoC because they look like an SoC. Like you've got basically a bunch of x86 cores surrounded by everything else being what you'd see on an ARM M chip or Snapdragon X chip. And here, I joked on Twitter and Threads that I'm calling it that, 5 years from now, Intel's chips will essentially be ARM chips, and there'll be one x86 core in there somewhere in that SoC, just so they can say they're x86, just so they can't say face. But I think it's inevitable. Like this is also manufactured by TSMC. Intel's not making their own chips anymore because they have to use the 3 nanometer stuff. And so to me, this is exciting because it means Intel is getting it. They are, no longer being all arrogant. They're trying hard to compete. And that's good news to me.
I mean, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it on their own. And what's interesting is when Microsoft had that event a couple of weeks ago announcing the Copilot Plus PCs, right? Snapdragon powered, the fastest Windows PCs. They're saying all these things. Now, obviously, it's not the fastest because you can get, a crazy gaming PC, but they did so many comparisons against the MacBook and the MacBook Air, right? The M3 versus the Snapdragon X. It's almost like they said it without saying it, though. Like, this almost felt like the funeral of x86 to me. I didn't even care about the comparisons to Apple. It was almost when Apple changed from Intel to Apple Silicon that first time. They were saying, we're making computers that we couldn't make with Intel.
I said that last week when we covered this stuff, is that I feel like because Microsoft is finally on board and the OEM are finally going like, oh crap, like we need to stay competitive and Microsoft's really behind this and we need to compete with Apple more, and Intel's still our best buddy, but they're really not quite delivering yet. So let's go with this. But I think, look, I'm definitely not counting Intel out. I think they're learning, and the end of their learning will be with them being ARM based. Like it's inevitable. They just have to slowly wrap their head and their culture around it, and that's why I think it'd be really funny if they put a tiny little x86 core and just a complex SoC with like multiple ARM CPU cores in there, because the reality is the only part that's x86 is the CPU. Like the rest is all like custom or acquired or whatever.
Correct.
And nothing wrong with that. That's how Apple became a monster. They acquired an ARM startup in the same way as then some people from Apple they made chips there left, and Nuvia got acquired by Qualcomm, and here we are, right, with a Snapdragon X. So speaking of chips, the last thing that happened this week is MediaTek. So MediaTek always has the 9000 series, and then they have the That's the flagship. And then the 8000 series comes out generally shortly after and is slightly scaled down. And then the 7000 series, kind of their bread and butter, right? So we don't see that because we don't see a lot of MediaTek chips in North America. But if you look at the smartphones being released in the mid-range in Asia, especially in China, it's like, the Snapdragon 7 series and the MediaTek 7000 series. So now they have a 7300 and a 7300X. And I will link to that in the show notes. But basically the takeaway is, it's definitely inheriting some of those technology we've seen in the higher end chips and bringing them down in price. And, things like LPDDR5 support, which is, and UFS 3.1, which we haven't seen at that level yet. Mm-hmm. So I think that's actually pretty exciting. It looks like one of those chips might be in one of the Razors. So let's stay tuned and see what happens.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, right? Crazy stuff.
Yes.
All right. Well, we should wrap up, Andrew. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, all your various social media handles, and tell them about your YouTube and Gear Live and whatever else?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest place to find my stuff is going to be youtube.com/@Andru, ANDRU. Or if you're more social and you don't like YouTube, I'm @Andru on Instagram or @Andru Edwards on TikTok and Twitter.
That's right.
I do video coverage of pretty much if it's in an Apple store or a Best Buy, and now cars as well. I do it all.
That's right. And folks, you should follow Andrew. Andrew's awesome. We've been doing blogging since we were babies almost. like we started in 2004, 5-ish, both of us. I think you might be before me years. A little bit. It's crazy. And because that we've known each other for that long, it's kind of amazing. And
it's weird.
You've pivoted so nicely, Andrew. I have to say kudos. I love how you went into video and just with abandon, and now here you are, and it's freaking amazing. So folks, follow Andrew everywhere and subscribe to the YouTube, and especially because Worldwide Developer Conference is right around the corner. So
I'll be there.
Yeah, it's going to be full of Andrew goodness. Folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankerl, TNKGRL, like the comic book. Just drop all the vowels and you get my handle on Twitter, on Threads, on Blue Sky, on Instagram. So follow me there, chat with me and Andrew there, and then, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't yet. It's on all the major platforms. mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL. If you want to just click on a quick add to my Apple podcast, you're going to go to the URL there. If you're old school, there's an RSS feed, all that good stuff. If your app lets you rate or review the show, please do that. That helps. Also, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. There's a channel there with some videos. I just posted an unboxing video of the Xiaomi 14 Ultra and the camera kit. I did that a few months back. I've just been really busy. I'm a little behind on my videos, but this is such a significant phone this year that I felt like I needed to give it some love. And so I did a really nice unboxing for you guys. So check it out, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. And then finally, there's a Patreon partner to this audio version of the podcast at patreon.com/Tankerl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. Gets you a video version of this podcast where you get to see our faces. And sometimes we have devices to brandish. And outtakes, and sometimes I go over time and we get the stuff in there. And look, it's $5 a month, so check it out. And if you don't want to spend that much money, you can support me in other ways. There's other tiers there. So please help me out if you can. And then, if you don't like using Patreon, I get it. Go to the show notes and you'll find a link to PayPal. You can buy me a coffee or something one time. So I appreciate your support. If you can help, that would be awesome. And I want to thank our sponsor as well, Mint Mobile. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. I want to thank you, Andrew, too, for being my guest yet again. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure being here. Great conversation as always.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being on the show. We'll have you on again at some point. And folks, we'll have another show next week after WWDC. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.